our second panel for today, and after such a great keynote presentation delivered by Miller Knoll team. So our next presentation is titled Bright Ideas, the Impact of Light on Employees' Well-Being. And just to give you a little bit of overview of what we're going to be discussing, this panel will delve into how lighting in workspaces influences the performance of employees, especially we're going to talk about this region in particular. Proper lighting has been shown to improve mood, reduce stress, and increase productivity by up to 23%, according to American Society of Interior Designers. We will also explore the science behind lighting design, the benefits of natural versus artificial light, and what are some of the practical strategies for optimizing office lighting to enhance employee well-being as well as efficiency in today's world of work and environment. So some of the key takeaways I hope we're going to deliver today is to understand how effective lighting can increase employee productivity and learn what are some of the strategies for using light to improve mood and reduce stress as well. Without further ado, panelists who will help us delve into this topic include Abdulaziz Al-Azim, founder and principal designer at DTS. Thank you so much for joining us on the stage. Peter Veal, design director at FPOV. He's not joining us. Okay, Tatiana? Okay, so I didn't get that information. David Gilby, Lighting Design Director at the Riagay Development Authority. Thank you so much for joining us. Shibani Talas. Shibani, okay. Senior Design Manager at the RIA Company. And Vijay Nambir, the Studio Director at Design Smith. Perfect. Apologies for that, David. Just my notes haven't been updated for that. Perfect. So, thank you all so much for joining us today. And obviously, lighting is such an important but often overlooked aspect when it comes to office design. Sometimes it seems like it's an afterthought, right? And sometimes offices, the way they perform, right? Sometimes it just comes at the end oh, we should have thought of this before. But before we dive into this topic, obviously this is our first Workspace Summit happening in Riyadh today. So I'm asking all of my panelists, why do you think it's important that we have discussions in such a niche sector such as office design and office spaces as well? And what do you think about Summit in general to have it as a platform to have these kind of conversations? So maybe we can start with you.
Well, actually, I truly believe it's a very important topic because nowadays with the impressive industrial boom that is happening in Saudi Arabia with all these projects, staying in office will be spent in a great time of the day, especially with designers from different parts of the world who are coming and even local people who are working. So they're spending a huge time in workspaces. So really educating people about the importance of properly designing the interior design of the space along with lighting and other matters is really very important because it creates awareness and it raises actually the quality of work and the deliverables in our society.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you. David, from your side.
I would say that when you look at the expense of a business, the capital cost of renting an office, the energy cost of keeping people warm and providing lighting, by far your biggest cost to your salaries. Keep the people happy, keep the people healthy, and post-COVID, provide an environment that they want to come back to.
Thank you.
So Marina, I completely agree that lighting has been such an afterthought in calculating people's well-being. It affects every part of our life. The reason we wake up and start operating and mentally awakening is because of the light from the sun. So why shouldn't that also be carried into the workplace? Sunlight or that level of blue light is what makes us awake. It's what increases serotonin, whereas lack of it encourages melatonin, which puts us to bed. So that's not what we want to be doing at work. So lighting has such an underrated part of overall design.
Thank you so much. Vijay, from your side.
So I think there's two parts to what you asked. One is why is Workspace Summit so important to the region? And for many years the region has given us so much incredible architecture and design, but there's an entire backbone of people working in many offices everywhere. There's locals, there's expats coming in and working, and finally the focus now is on making their quality of workspaces much better. And of course lighting is such an integral part of it, and not only providing light but controlling light. This region is blessed with incredible amounts of natural light, and sometimes that can be detrimental to performance, right? So lighting is not only about actually providing light, but allowing the right amount of light to be available, to perform the best.
Okay. So before we talk about, strategies and implementation, just from your line of work, here I just have some numbers, right? The poor lighting can reduce productivity by up to 30% and increase errors by 25%. And Shibani, going back to what you as well just mentioned as well. From your line of business as well, do you see this data being very applicable? What do you see in terms of, as I said, from your perspective, does light really has that impact on employees? And as you said, keeping employees happy, right?
Well, I truly believe light has a huge impact on the psychology of those who are working in workplace. There is a direct impact, and sometimes it is actually creating an impact more than let's say a comfortable seat or a properly distributed furniture. Of course it's important, but if you have a very well designed space with a very poor lighting distribution, with a high amount of glare, for example, and wrong color temperatures, etc., this will create a huge drop in performance. So in my experience as a local lighting designer, it has a big impact. And I can just give a very quick example. In my office, for example, I have my office in a lower ground. It's in the basement, but it is designed in a way that it has a lot of natural skylights, so there's a lot of natural daylight entering. There are different lighting zones. There's diffuse light, there is direct light. So when you have different lighting layers created, this will really create a positive psychological boost for the people who are in the space, and they will have a much more comfortable experience.
Interesting. David, from your side.
The interesting thing from an architectural lighting designer's perspective is we will design holistically. We'll look at everything. We'll look at glare, we'll look at vertical illumination, we'll create the mood and atmosphere in the space, we'll look at people's health. But generally, when it comes to office lighting, we get the pretty part of the building. We get the meeting rooms, we get the entrance, the lobbies, and so on and so forth. So it's the engineer that tends to do office lighting, and what he's obsessed is numbers. Meeting uniformity, meeting the right light level on the horizontal surface on the desk. And apologies to any engineers in the room, but I think they dream in numbers where I dream in visions of beauty. The exception to that are the best workspaces, the Apples, the Googles. I've been very fortunate to light 2 Googles, one in Dublin and one in London. And when you see the efforts they go to keep their staff, to retain their staff, to get the right productivity, and so on and so forth, even to and it was interesting for me to hear the keynote before, talking about the different types of spaces. Well, we can do that with light as well. We can have reflective space, contemplative space. We can create tea rooms. Some of the best design conversations happen at the coffee pot as opposed to around the meeting room table. So it's like creating the right scene, and I wish it was taken more seriously, because quite often in this drive for speed and cost, the engineer does it, it gets value engineered down to something quite shoddy sometimes. And I think, I'm hoping that in a post-COVID world, that the usage of office space will change. So there'll be more shared desking, more creative hubs, and so on and so forth. And the lighting should reflect that. That's what I feel. I feel every employer should put a task light on someone's desk. That's such an easy way for you to control your lighting in your own environment. I saw years ago BT had a big open plan office, and they allowed everyone to control the dimming individually above their desk on the telephone, the BT, British Telecom. And great idea, but it just looked like a hot pot. It just didn't work holistically across the whole open space. But I think workspace really deserves the same attention to detail as the lobbies and the reception area.
Thank you, and it's great that you mentioned that. We can talk later about that. We talked a lot with different panels on that, individual needs of employees as well, and lighting it's such a challenge to meet those needs as well. But Shivani, just going back to what we discussed about, you mentioned about value engineering, you mentioned about those challenges. Do you also face in your line of work those challenges where just, you mentioned lighting becoming an afterthought, right? But what challenges do you face when it comes to delivering projects the way you want as well?
It's a challenge, I think, that we're all collectively working to resolve. And it's something, just touching on what David said, we talk about inclusive design, and it's been a long time coming, in including having the American Disabilities Act being implemented and now becoming a requirement in all the new buildings. We design things architecturally to include people with different abilities. What we don't give enough value to is how much lighting is also part of that. And there is no code for that yet, unfortunately. Something as simple as, so going back to when I first started working, which was years ago, we used to joke that offices were just hell with fluorescent lighting. But we know now that we've got ambient lighting and we've got task lighting, what David said, and what a profound impact it has on our well-being, because people see things literally visually differently. When you get to past 40, you need a higher level of light to even read a drawing. And so it's been a challenge to sort of get owners and operators and developers to implement that without any exceptions, like spending on a lighting budget to have different types of lightings. But it's such a huge part of inclusive design that we just don't give it enough importance.
Okay, Vijay, from your side.
So I think from the perspective of being a design and build company, right? Us and others in the industry have been guilty of the whole value engineering process. And that has been because of 2 or 3 reasons. One is because we think we're experts at everything, but there are people like David and everybody who are exceptional knowledge providers about lighting and all that, right? So it's important that design companies, contractors understand the importance of working with experts. There's a lot of points that we just mentioned about, lights being specific to the user, right? And exactly as Shivani said, the whole idea of someone at 40 needs a different level of light as compared to someone at 20. It does not only affect productivity, but it also kind of then starts leading to frustration, dissent, health issues, and all of this goes back to employee retention, all of that, right? We as a business, some time ago decided that we will work with experts for everything, right? And there's no kind of exceptions to that. And it's not about scale, it's whether it's a small office, big office. It's a reception space. It's all being habitated by humans, right? And an extremely bright reception space with like a large screen is also equally annoying for someone who's sitting there for 10 minutes, right? Same with a guy who's sitting on a chair for like 7, 8, 9 hours and cannot handle, like what David said, lights, like, at a high level, and everybody's kind of controlled differently. Plus, they also have to deal with natural light, you know. So mornings they have glare on the screen, nights they can't see too clearly. So I think we're guilty of that till now, but I think as a business, and I think almost everybody in the industry is learning that we all need to evolve, because in the future, the employee is the center of design. Right? It's not the space, it's not the people who are using it are the center. Right?
But just going back to your line of business now, and not just reflecting your company where you worked before, but also companies where you worked before as an interior designer, how often you could persuade your client, listen, we do need a lighting designer on board from the start, from the concept. We need to involve them to understand this is how we work. How often, or do you think?
So I think it's not about, see, a client does not need convincing if it doesn't hit his pocket, right? If I told them I'll give you 10 consultants for free, they'll take everybody. Whether it is lighting, acoustics, whoever you can offer, right? So one is we need to first identify what actually good design and profitability in a business is. Whether, for example, offering a really good workspace means good business for us, or we just want to continue doing a million offices that don't work, right? So there have been times where, for the sake of better design, we would have taken a hit on our fees, where we still manage to accommodate an expert, but probably change the scope slightly. We take some kind of external lessons from them to develop it further. But I would go to extent of saying about 50-60% of our projects, we manage to have a consultant on board. And again, we work with people we know because there's a sense of familiarity, but there's also a sense of exchange, right? Like we learn from them. You know?
Okay,
The biggest buzzword at the moment is circadian rhythm lighting and resetting our body clock. And the best way to reset your body clock from a hangover, from jet lag, is to go and sit outside in the sun for 25 minutes, half an hour. There is science. The science is proven because NASA are going to be sending people to Mars, where they're going to be in space forever so long, so they've had to, with artificial light, find ways to keep them healthy in space. So the science is proven, and manufacturers do a lot of research, and God bless them. But there are also scoundrels in manufacturing that are sort of saying this provides circadian rhythm lighting, will reset our body clock, but they're not really showing their spectral distribution. They're not really showing how much melanopic lux that they're and there's the jury's out on how much you need. There's research going on at UCR Bartlett University at the moment that will finish, and I know the guy doing the research, and I think he says that you need to receive something like 240 melanopic lux to get any benefit from that circadian rhythm lighting. So people have quickly jumped on the bandwagon, and just because they've got a broad spectrum light said this is a circadian rhythm light. Is it? Philips were first to the market with this years ago with a product called Carpe Diem. And what they would do with fluorescent tubes is they'd mix warm white and cool white. And the theory was great. It will make the office warm in the morning like a sunrise, and then we'll get bluer through the day like the blue sky and the clouds, and we'll tone it down in the evening. It was lovely. Carpe Diem, seize the day in Latin. But what sneaky employers used to do, we all have that dead spot when we come back from lunch, probably about 2:30, 3 o'clock, where we hit, a low.
Yeah.
They would ramp all the lights on and use it almost like an espresso hit of light, or a Red Bull of light. So that's not really human-centric. That's taking advantage of technology. And even back in the day in London, in the end of the 90s, 2000s, offices looked like caves because all the light was glare controlled on the desk, but there was no vertical illumination whatsoever. So then they went LG3 2001, which said the space has to, Light and Guide 3, sorry, from Sibsey. The space has to be compliant, not the luminaire. And you still had manufacturers saying, this is an LG3 compliant luminaire. How could it be if it's the space that's compliant, not the luminaire? You could use a bare light bulb from your home. It's not what you use, it's how you use it. So it's this fine line between whether it's true science or someone trying to sell you snake oil.
Or a marketing fault, yeah. Okay, Abdulaziz, from your side, anything to
Well,
add?
actually, I also agree with what David is talking about. This dynamic white lighting, that it has been utilized and used in a way much more than needed. I also truly believe that a properly designed space with lighting, especially if we can see in the history of lighting design, we can see a lot of examples, very good examples of projects even before the presence of real lighting designers, when architects were doing both, like Frank Lloyd Wright. He used to design the architectural space, but there was a lot of keen attention about light. He even designed special luminaires for, the villas he designed. There were special luminaires, special lights, and so on. So the main thing is, actually, it is very important to, as lighting designers, is to sometimes being the word that says less is more. Sometimes by utilizing this concept, it is very positive in the way we design things. The more we make things complicated, in reality, maybe the trading part or the trading companies are benefiting more, but at the end, the function of the space will not deliver what actually a human being needs. Because what we have now, it's just maybe 15 or even less than 15 years, maybe 10 years old, with a very amazing technology like dynamic white or all these technologies that are available now in the market. Before, we had amazing projects, we had amazing productivity, we had amazing spaces. So it's not always that whenever there is a new technology, we need to utilize it and force the clients to use it in an extensive way. It's actually, we need to use it in the proper way, and maybe sometimes these lights, like the dynamic white light, it is sometimes beneficial in certain spaces, but as David mentioned, you cannot really just have these lights applied without understanding the need of it, because it really plays with your hormones. So it might be actually affecting a negative impact on your body.
Shabani, what? Yeah.
I was going to say, I love that we got a world-class interior designer up here, because there's so much more to it. Light and colour, light and texture. You can do so much more visual interest in an office space. And when you were coming back to VE and one thing and another, the limiter to creativity is not the budget. It's the ideas. You can create such inspiring space on a shoestring, and that's. I mean, we're talking about light, but Shibani's instincts on the space overall, very much part of this.
Actually, don't have anything to add. You guys said it all.
But just going back to what Abdulaziz mentioned about, and David as well, about that, the technology has to be also, that light technology has to be user-friendly. When we say user-friendly, just overused terminology. But sometimes this technology is very complicated, and if it's not used in a proper way, and it's not, applicable to all, we talk about different generations in offices, right? We talk about Gen Zs all the way to baby boomers and traditionalists, right? So they all have a different relationship with using new technologies as well. So how do you find that? Is that something that you also find a bit challenging when it comes to implementing the new technologies? And
I agree with that, because even now when I go to hotels and I'm over 45, sometimes I struggle with all the lighting controls, and they have these intelligent panels, and I just want to switch some days to just turn it on and off. But I think the technology is getting so much better, so much faster, that I think we need to embrace it too. And it's something that's going to take time to evolve, but it's like AI. You can't get away from it. So, and there's no point being paranoid about it. So we just have to learn to embrace it and use it to our advantage. And I think lighting is definitely in that realm.
Okay, perfect. Peter, from your side, anything to add?
No, I think something that David mentioned, and I think in the beginning Abdulaziz had mentioned, is solutions don't have to be expensive, right? So, for example, you mentioned about task lights on every desk. It's not really technology. You know, you're just allowing control to individuals so that they can set what they want. You're not saying there's this panel on the wall and everybody goes press 16 buttons to get to the light that they want to change. Same with how Abdulaziz's office is in the basement. The answer is not to complicate it, put sensors everywhere, but basically he said something like skylights. You know, how do you bring natural light into the space? As designers, we learn from these experiences. Like you said, we go to hotels, we go to workspaces. We see places where people have made mistakes. We see places where people have got it right. The skill lies in kind of finding solutions that are kind of acceptable, easy to use, because otherwise it's like your like your smart toilets. You know, you really don't know what's going to happen next, right? And lighting is such an intricate part of your life, like you said, from morning to night. You don't really have a choice of wasting time figuring out what the right setting is. So in most of the design that we do, we try to keep it as controllable as possible and as simple as possible, you know, if it is focused.
Thank you so much. And just going back to the topic, we discussed a lot about, you know, the LEED certified offices, and more often we now talk a bit more about the well building standard, which doesn't just look at the building itself, but it also looks at people who are using the space. And access to good lighting and access to natural lighting is one of the key aspects and one of the key pillars of looking at the well standard as well. So just from your perspective, and just going back what you mentioned about, you know, it does start with the spacing. It does start with the layout. Before, as David mentioned, we have to solve the problems of receptions, meeting rooms. Do you feel that the natural lighting is utilized in a proper way in offices today?
Well, this is actually something which is way far off, especially in, let's say, in Saudi Arabia, maybe especially in Riyadh. This is one of the actually topics that I always try to push my clients to do, whether it's in offices or even in residential projects, is to really harvest daylight. And of course, there are many ways that you can harvest daylight and have it inside the space and control it in order to benefit from daylight by reducing the consumption of artificial lighting. And it is something that is a taboo in Saudi, that you know, because sun has heat, so we try our level best to run away and shade it. But as a matter of fact, now there are technologies where you can allow sunlight to enter without having heat, especially UV filters and so on. And actually, I was very happy one time in all the 14 years of my experience in lighting design. One of my recent clients, she's actually a lady who's been planning to build a house with her husband. She requested a daylight analysis for her house. And for me, that was a request that was really stunning, that someone who really understands the importance of daylighting. I really believe that if in Saudi Arabia daylighting is harvested in the proper manner, maybe more than 70% of energy saving will be done, because you will have enough daylighting with as we have seen in the previous presentation, these open spaces are done where you have now most of the buildings are having open big glass windows. So you will have really a lot of natural daylight entering. So you can have from morning maybe till afternoon a lot of good amount of natural light. Of course you will need artificial lighting as well, but you will save. But it's not only about saving, it's also by having good healthy light. Because whatever you have quality of artificial light, whether it's a high CRI, a low frequency, or all these new technologies that are proving that is very healthy, still natural light cannot be preceded.
It's never gonna. And what David says, you know, just having those 5 minutes on a natural daylight. David, do you have anything to add?
People assume that as lighting designers we trade in artificial light, and we do, but daylight is our friend. It's certainly not our enemy, and we're using it in very creative ways. Firstly, trying to harvest it for energy savings, but I've seen it in buildings like conference centres where we're using slats and different ways of controlling the beam to almost use like the rays of the sun as are on a vertical surface. I was lucky enough to do a study on a building in Dubai. A facade is beautiful in the daytime if it's a beautiful facade. It's beautiful at night if it's illuminated well. But what we tried to do with diachroic glass, mirrors and actuators to change angle is to make a building attractive using the sunlight. So it's certainly, and what it does for, I love the fact that light and daylight and greenery and biophilia can affect us psychologically, but that can affect us physiologically. So it's well researched in hospitals. If you've got a little bit of greenery and some daylight coming in, they dispense less pain beds and people get well quicker. That's because they feel better, so they get better. And yeah, all of this should be used more. We talk about biophilia, there's always the thing as well, ESG. You can't really measure the benefits of that, but that's to do with the well-being of our staff, and part of that is creating the environment and using light and natural light to do that.
Shmara, from your side.
Actually, I'd like to touch on something that Abdulaziz was saying before about harvesting daylight and how undervalued that is. And we just have to look back into our, traditional building methods, whether it was in Saudi Arabia or large parts of, even I grew up in India, so a lot of the north has climate like this. It's dry, desert, it's extreme. And all those houses used to have courtyards. And that's what brought light in, and it also ensured privacy. You have the furjats here, which are little openings that bring light in. And sometimes we need to, technology is important, but we also need to look back into traditions and what we've been doing for hundreds of years, and it's worked. And sometimes I think we stray so far into the future or into embracing technology that we overcomplicate things. And lighting is one of those essential fundamental parts of architecture that, we have so much to sort of learn from our traditional roots. So that's, I think, Abdulaziz, I completely agree with you on daylight and the impact that it has on our well-being.
And it's such a wonderful terminology that you use, harvesting daylight, right? It just sounds beautiful as well. But Vijay, going back from an interior design perspective, and obviously, as I previously mentioned, it all starts with the layout. Do you have these conversations with your clients? Because we know when we talk about a corner office, right? Terminology of C-suite, managerial offices, corner offices who are harvesting the most of that daylight, where employees have been maybe pushed towards the middle with less access. Do you see the shift in having those conversations of, okay, well, why do we need to give those premium locations to maybe our staff as well?
So I think that workspace design has evolved over the years, right? So you were right. There was a point when all the C-suite offices were corner offices, all the managers and all those cabins were along the facade, and all the people working were towards the core, right? They wanted everything. They wanted the sunlight, they wanted the views, they wanted everything there, but they sat for the least amount of time in that seat, right? Things have changed over a period of time. Of course, I was attending the panel, I think yesterday, about the thing, and you spoke about the corner offices. It's not easy to tell somebody that their best view is not for the CEO. It's tough. But we're seeing CEOs actually agree to not using that because they also understand that they're only for maybe 2 hours a day, right? Doesn't happen every time, but it is kind of an evolving process. We have to keep talking to them about it. And you said harvesting, they are harvesting the light. If light stops at the first kind of wall, then it's not harvesting, right? They're kind of actually blocking light for everybody else. So we do try to educate, most of the management and explain how, in the long run, productivity is really impacted by people not getting natural light, people not getting enough control over their spaces. And we've seen a shift. We've clearly seen a shift where people are changing how they work. We've seen meeting rooms and collaborative spaces move towards the corners where the lights are high because there are more people there. They have multifunctional spaces happening on that side. But we're not entirely there. I mean, that onus lies on us as designers to kind of convince, management members, it's best for the business. The other part of this whole conversation that we spoke about was naturally, even as these buildings are being designed now, you will notice that, for example, the wet areas are closer to the core, which forces you to then put pantries and toilets and all along the core, which automatically forces you to put workspaces and workstations along the glazing. So it's not just the interiors, but the architects have also responded to what's happening. If the building has a depth that's wide enough, then like you said, there will be some kind of natural light coming through a central core. There might be a skylight, there might be a courtyard, there might be an atrium. But it's a process where everybody's collaborating to make these better. And with every passing building, we're learning.
Okay, thank you. And just kind of going back to, I know there is not one solution and one size fits all, it goes from project by project, but in your line of business, what are some of those strategies that should be implemented as a, non-negotiables when it comes to lighting design, especially to have those productive and healthy workspaces?
Well, of course, first, one of the first strategies that we try to push for and convince the client that it is something we can't say it's non-negotiable, because at the end you need to have the client feel, at the end you are serving the need of the client, but we always try our level best to convince him that there should be really different lighting layers in office spaces. Usually in office projects, there is a big tendency, whether it's a high-end office space or not, there is a tendency that the clients are saying, okay, we will have these single type of luminaires distributed everywhere. Of course, maybe only for the CEO office or the management, they will have something else. But then the rest will have this uniform, diffused kind of lighting strategy. This is where we always try to push and try to convince the client that there should be really different lighting layers inside the space if you really want to have, at the end, whether the client is a business owner who is doing a trading business or a consultant or whatever it is, he needs to have his employees staying in a place where they are they are more productive. So the most important aspect is actually creating different lighting layers in terms of horizontal illumination, vertical illumination. Of course, then you have the different lighting effects in terms of diffuse light, focused light in certain areas, preventing glare as much as we can. And of course, the thing you mentioned before is having daylight as much as possible. Sometimes in certain projects, if there is no daylight possibility, there are solutions where you have this fake imitation, mimicking daylight solutions. Yeah, so these are actually one of the really criterias we try to push for. Even if the budgets are so low, we always try to focus by creating different lighting layers. It's exactly the same job as the architect does. When an architect comes to a project, the first thing they do, they create different zones, different layers, different volumes. Lighting is actually, it works the same way. If you have lighting functioning as a single effect in all spaces, then the result will be a very negative result.
Thank you so much. David, from your side.
Good coffee.
Good coffee.
Good coffee is really important.
That's a non-negotiable. It's becoming, yes.
I think more visual interest. Going back to, layers is a word that lighting designers love, and it's true. But good light on the verticals, color, texture, greenery, daylight, just create an environment. And you can also at the same time create studious places, head down spaces that are a little bit less, I don't know if playful's the word, but and different areas, different breakout areas, and give them a different personality, a different feeling. And light is about that, especially in creative space. And I suppose bankers can even be creative as they strategize and play with our pensions. So just look at the space as a whole, look at the usage of the space, but whichever, whether it's a dead serious space, whether it's a lawyer's space, having good vertical lighting, having visual interest, pictures, some colour, some plants, will always work.
Thank you so much. Banu, from your side.
I think for me there is no such thing as non-negotiable. Everything is negotiable. We always trade off, and there's a price for everything. If you can't have this, you can have something else. Having said that, however, I think what is non-negotiable would be evolution and change that's happening. And like Vijay said, there is a mindset change. That's a work in progress for clients and for office owners. So you have the basics of good design, and I'm going back to the lady from Miller Knoll, and she ended her presentation with that quote from Herman Miller that said, it's not the profit and loss that's going to be remembered at the end of a company's tenure, it's the impact they've had on humanity. And by humanity, it's about employees, and what Vijay said, people are the stars, the workers are the stars, and if you're not looking after them, then your business isn't growing, and that is a non-negotiable, I think. And that comes through so many different ways. Good lighting, of course, good ergonomic furniture, and that's all part of employee retention and well-being, because this is not just psychological. It ultimately, as David said, it has a physiological effect. And if you don't have your health and your mental peace of mind, I mean, it's a complete failure of workplace design.
Okay, thank you. PJ, for you to add.
So I think for me, there are primarily two elements in design which I feel, I won't say non-negotiables, but I feel these must happen at some point in time in the future. These should become a part of our routine work, right? One is that I think David mentioned before about research that's being done at UC Berkeley, and there's so much development happening. While we're still sometimes just relying on traditional, knowledge and methods and stuff like that. And then there are experts in the market like Abdulaziz and David who know these things, right? So it becomes important that as people who are in the industry of design and construction, we have to constantly evolve ourselves. We have to constantly keep learning more so that we can offer the same to the client. And if I'm basically a salesman for my lighting consultant, right? If I can convince my client that lighting is important, then they will come to David, and then they'll learn why it was so much better, right? And the part that I feel is not happening today, but for example, like you mentioned, you can't have a building anywhere in the world without an architect. It's now given that you want to start a project, get an architect involved. Now we're also getting a point where you want to do interiors, you need an expert to come in, because for whatever reason, you need approvals or whatever, or you want design, you get someone. Yeah. Strangely, lighting is still optional. Architects can do lighting, designers can do lighting, everybody, like the client knows what to do. So in the future, hopefully this will change. It has to become, for example, I would go to the extent of saying, as a design studio, we have MEP engineers in our office. We should also have people who actually are designing lighting, right? Why would we not want to work with experts? Right? It only makes my business better. It makes my client's life better. And right now, again, even for us, these are all things that are optional. We consider whether we want to kind of invest in this, but there will be a point in the future when this will not be an option. We will go to experts, and Abdulaziz and David will all kind of play a much larger role in our understanding of workspaces and how we make it better.
But I like what you...
It's just quickly, it's really quite interesting when you talk about VE and one thing and another. If you lit an office to 300 lux, not 500 lux, and put a task light on everyone's desk. You give them individual control and you'll save a fortune.
Okay. And I like what you said, maybe just to end on that, what you said, that as a designers, you are the one who needs to convince the clients. And I think that's that the educational part that comes in place, right? For designers to, it's not just about beautiful spaces and those aspects when different expertise, we did talk a lot about noise pollution, acoustics, lighting. Those are all aspects that are, in a way, affecting productivity so much. I'm just mindful of time, so I would like to see if maybe we can take some questions from the audience. If anyone have questions for our panelists. Here's one question. Okay, two. Okay, that's fine. We can take two questions, yeah.
Hi, so thank you very much for the talk. To quickly introduce myself, I'm a researcher and a scientist at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York. I have a PhD in light and health, and so it's very interesting to have this kind of talks happening here. But I would like you to ask a couple of questions here that I think that are very important, because here you're speaking about design, but we forget about performance verification, which is also part of the well-building standard. So are you considering verification of the arguments that you are selling so that the customer can be sure that they were getting what they were paying for? One. Then we're speaking, David, about user preference, and my experience is that people choose the wrong setting with lighting always. So when you allow the user to choose something, they will choose the opposite of what they need. They choose what they like. Mm-hmm. This is the same as when you go to a school and you offer candies to the child. They will take the candies, but this is not good for their health, necessarily.
Okay. Let's just maybe start with that, because of the audio issue. Were you able to hear the question?
Yeah, just about. It's a huge subject, and we've just scratched the surface of it. Lighting is everything. Lighting is cultural. Lighting is different things to different people. If you've ever lit a residence in India where families live together, the old people want brighter, whiter, cool white light, and the young people want sort of a more cozy environment. So we have the technology to please all. In Sweden, I have never specified so much as one cool white light. It's cold outside, it's snowy, they want warmth, warm white light. So it's a whole, honestly, it is a can of worms, but you can create environments. We talked briefly, I didn't get too much to say on the world standard and lead, and I think it's great that they've made the start, they're taking people forward, but I hate that it's so tick box. We can do real things with light. We can energize people in the morning, we can calm them in the evening, we can make them well, we can inspire them. I just wish people understood what we were trying to do and how to do it. So very, very interestingly as well, we talked about biophilia. I've lit a lot of green walls, and I think in any other aspect of lighting design, I'm a holistic thinker, totally think it through. But when I got to light green walls, I go, keep the plants alive, keep the plants alive. So I lit them at the daylight end of the spectrum. And I think in hindsight, they looked rubbish because they were healthy, but the light didn't enhance the appearance of the light. And when I worked that out, I actually did research myself at UCL Bartlett University on how to keep plants healthy and make them look good at the same time with artificial light. You always find there's almost more questions than there are answers, and we have to keep pushing, feeding the design monkey inside and trying to solve these problems. But we can do so much more with light for people's health and, great visual environment at the same time.
Thank you so much. Yes.
So,
If I could just ask you to keep the mic a bit closer. Yes.
oh, okay.
Yes, thank you so much.
I was thinking that it was going to be a problem with the
Yes.
loudspeaker. So, the question then is, as both of you were saying also that you have to convince the client, but I think that it should be the opposite because you were speaking before about education. So, which are not the selling arguments, but the buying arguments that you can find, you have found in the market. So, what was really has been asked to you for buying, not for selling, because the market is mainly driven by MIP people. They don't know anything about this field. So, were you getting any buying arguments rather than you having to sell and convince?
I will ask Abdulaziz maybe. Yes.
Actually, well, I don't know if my answer would be correct on this matter, but sometimes if you focus on culture and on the cultural aspect, on the heritage aspect, as well as the historical aspect with the client, especially here in our region, if you let your client understand that you really understand his background and what he really feels is best, and then you try to change it in a way and have him understand that this is the right way by just enhancing the idea that he has in his mind, because most of the clients, they know what they want, but sometimes not in the right way. So the functions, they know it, the themes, they know it, but sometimes they give suggestions that are not typically correct. It's not because it's as you mentioned, it's a knowledgeable thing, but I truly believe learning from history, culture, and especially from the past, it is very important, especially in a world which is really driven here, I can say in my country, in Saudi Arabia, culture, history, and heritage is something very attached to us in a way that even if I am very modernized, I am not following my culture anymore, but I still have this in my thoughts and the way I live, even in the way I work, in the way I expect my workspace to be done or my house to be done, or in the way how my architect should speak with me or my lighting designer should speak with me. So it is really very culturally driven. So I believe that if we grasp this matter, it really pays off.
Thank you so much. And I think we can just have one more question. I'm just mindful of time for our next presentation. So we'll just take one more question here. Yes.
Hi.
Okay.
So you talked about harvesting light. Most of you talked about harvesting light and adding layers, etc. I was wondering how AI could be used to, well, harvest light and add those layers, and if that could be a possible solution that you could offer to clients rather than having an expert on board, which could be possibly more, money consuming. Or perhaps is it too specialized a field to use AI for?
I'll just, sorry.
Maybe we can ask Vijay and Shivani to answer
just a
this
small
one.
part. Though, like I said, our belief from where we come from as designers, the subject remains lighting, right? If it is AI related to spaces, design, ergonomics, finishes, materials, all of that, we work on it ourselves, we educate ourselves a lot more, right? I'm sure there are technologies in place which the experts know way better about. But again, like Abdulaziz had mentioned in the beginning, there are technologies there, and not everything needs to be, implemented today. I'm sure things are evolving. I'm sure at some point of time this will become, critical practice that you use all this. But for now, even something that existed, for example, 10 years ago, like the basic sensors, people still don't know about that, right? And just a small point regarding what the gentleman had asked before, it's not about us doing design and walking out of there for a light and somebody kind of, goes to the wrong setting. Like in every other component, education, training, this is important. We've done projects where we've actually taken the suppliers post completion of project, to do an entire workshop for the entire staff, to teach them the value of these settings, what could be the right kind of settings to work with. Of course, there's a certain level of personalization after that, right? But like you said, I wouldn't give them the option of going from like a 3,000 to a 6,000 on their task, so that everybody then works under different light colors, you know.
Okay.
I've got to jump in very quickly on that. AI is a tool. It needs curation. I cannot tell you how many AI-generated lighting renders I have reviewed that, you know, look fabulous if they're a painting, but you're not going to be able to realize that light. Where is the light going to come from? So unless someone with technical knowledge and expertise is curating the AI, it's nonsense.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I would have to conclude the panel, and once again, just a big round of applause for our speakers. Thank you so much for joining today's discussion.